The greatest pain in life is losing the only family member you have left, leaving you all alone. Although Jimmy and Chuck had gone their separate ways, Chuck was still his older brother. Chuck's sudden death left Jimmy deeply unsettled. Jimmy felt that Chuck's death was related to him. Just when he was feeling guilty and remorseful, Howard suddenly came and confessed. Howard believed it was his firing of Chuck that led Chuck to take his own life. Upon hearing this, Jimmy immediately shifted his guilt and self-blame onto Howard. The next day, Jimmy acted as if nothing had happened and scheduled a bunch of interviews for himself. Kim felt that Jimmy was acting a bit strangely, so she suggested that he take some time to rest and adjust his mood before looking for a job. But Jimmy stubbornly refused. He felt there was no need to wait, and besides, they needed the financial support. Seeing that her persuasion was ineffective, Kim had no choice but to respect Jimmy's decision. In Kim's view, Jimmy was just looking for another distraction to take his mind off things. Jimmy arrived at the parking lot of the company where he had an interview. Before getting out of the car, he brushed his hair and noticed he was starting to lose it. This was a direct reaction to his recent excessive stress. Jimmy was interviewing for a sales position at a store that sold printers. Before Mr. Neff arrived, the HR manager, Henry, gave him a brief introduction. Jimmy saw Mr. Neff's collection of Hummel figurines. Henry explained that these were left to them by Mr. Neff's late grandmother. Jimmy knew these figurines were valuable because he had a client who collected these art pieces. However, to Mr. Neff, these Hummel figurines were just junk.
Touring the wall of crap, I see. I need to drag that stuff to the dumpster, just haven't had a chance to motivate myself.
It could be said that Mr. Neff didn't appreciate their worth. This also hinted that this boss would not recognize the rare talent in the interviewee in front of him. Seeing that Jimmy's resume listed his previous occupation as a lawyer, Mr. Neff immediately felt that Jimmy wasn't suitable for the job. But Jimmy explained that lawyers are the best salespeople because they constantly have to persuade others in their work. Additionally, he had experience working in the mailroom of a law firm, so he knew various models of copiers better than he knew himself. Although Jimmy's points made some sense, after a few brief exchanges, Mr. Neff politely told Jimmy to wait for a response. However, just as Jimmy was about to leave, he hesitated and stopped. He felt his abilities hadn't been fully demonstrated, so he turned back to try to convince Mr. Neff to hire him on the spot. After a burst of eloquent persuasion and a passionate speech from Jimmy, Mr. Neff was unexpectedly convinced and agreed that Jimmy could start that day. However, Jimmy's next reaction left them puzzled.
Are you out of your mind? You don't know me. I just came in off the street. You guys are like a couple of cats. I come in, wave a shiny object around, you're like, I want that. No due diligence, no background check. No, just hire the guy that says them fancy words.
So you're not taking the job?
No, I'm not taking the job. Suckers. I feel sorry for you.
Jimmy stormed out of the store, feeling that someone like Mr. Neff wasn't fit to be his boss. Meanwhile, Kim received a notice from Howard and went to HHM law firm to help Jimmy sign Chuck's estate agreement. Also present was Chuck's ex-wife, Rebecca. Howard handed over Jimmy's share of the inheritance, but sadly, it was only a symbolic $5,000. In Kim's eyes, this was an attempt to exclude Jimmy without provoking any protest. Howard mentioned that Chuck had donated a substantial amount to a scholarship fund for disadvantaged youth, and he hoped Jimmy would agree to serve on the board. He then handed Kim a letter Chuck had left for Jimmy. However, just as they were about to leave, a furious Kim asked Howard to stay, saying she had something to discuss with him. After Rebecca left, Kim couldn't hold back and questioned Howard about why he said those things to Jimmy after Chuck's funeral. Howard explained that he felt he owed Jimmy the truth, but to Kim, this was just an excuse Howard used to ease his own guilt. To make himself feel better, Howard felt Kim's accusation was unfair, which only fueled Kim's anger further.
Hey, let's let Jimmy dig around the fire-damaged wreck where his brother died screaming! And then let's let him pick up a keepsake or two! That is so fair! Did I hear you right? You want him to serve on the board of a scholarship committee? A scholarship that Chuck never in a million years would have given to Jimmy. Never! It is just, oh, what's this too, huh, Howard? What's in this? One last screw you, little brother, from beyond the grave? Am I really supposed to do this to him?
Kim's sharp rebuke left Howard speechless. He wanted to make amends for the harm he'd caused them, but Kim did not accept it. She warned Howard to stay away from her and Jimmy. That evening, when Kim and Jimmy got home, they both kept their worries to themselves, only sharing the good news. Kim didn't give Jimmy the letter from Chuck, fearing it would make him feel worse. So, they decided to relax by watching a movie. However, they found an even more relaxing way to unwind than watching a movie. After Kim fell asleep, Jimmy thought about the Hummel figurines he had seen at the copy shop earlier. He quietly got up and went online to do some research, discovering that the figurine was worth over $8,000. Since the owner didn't recognize its value, Jimmy figured he might as well make better use of it. He decided to ask Mike to help swap it out. The next day, he met Mike at their usual restaurant and detailed his plan, proposing to split the profits evenly, but to Jimmy's surprise, Mike declined and advised Jimmy against doing it. However, Jimmy felt it was as easy as picking up money off the street. Given that he was short on cash, Jimmy didn't want to miss such a good opportunity, so he sought out Caldera to introduce him to a suitable thief. That night, Ira successfully infiltrated the copy shop. Following Jimmy's instructions, he quickly located the Hummel figurine. However, just as Ira swapped it out and was about to leave, he heard the sound of a toilet flushing. Panicked, he quickly hid. It turned out Mr. Neff hadn't left the store. He was puzzled about how the door had opened but didn't suspect a break-in. Through Mr. Neff's phone call with his wife, Ira learned that Mr. Neff had been fighting with his wife. Ira hid under a nearby desk, barely daring to breathe. Then he heard Mr. Neff order some late-night takeout. It seemed Ira wouldn't be able to leave that night. While Mr. Neff went to get the takeout, Ira hurriedly contacted Jimmy for help. Before Mr. Neff could finish his late-night snack, Jimmy triggered the alarm on his car outside. However, Mr. Neff merely stepped out to the doorway and turned off the alarm. Ira still couldn't find an opportunity to escape. In desperation, Jimmy managed to open the door and release the handbrake, causing the car to slip out. Seeing this, Mr. Neff rushed over to try to stop the car. Only then did Ira get a chance to escape. It seemed that getting those $8,000 wasn't going to be easy. The next day, Kim took the opportunity to show Chuck's will to Jimmy. In the end, she couldn't resist giving Jimmy the letter as well. Kim intended to leave Jimmy alone to read it, but Jimmy stopped her. He wanted to share his privacy with Kim.
He brought a shine to her life that nothing else ever did, and I'm glad of that. New paragraph. We have not always seen eye to eye. I expect that will continue to be so in the future. However, nothing will ever change the fact that we are brothers, flesh and blood. And though we are very different people, I want you to know how much I respect what you have made of yourself in these last few years. You have taken the opportunity I gave you in the mailroom, and you have run with it, becoming a valued member of the HHM family. For all the problems in your past, I'm proud we share the name McGill. I sincerely admire your energy and resilience. I used to worry about you finding a place in the world.
Since it was a will, some parts were quite emotional. Tears welled up in Kim's eyes, but Jimmy showed no emotion as he read the letter. Kim felt out of control and wanted to be alone to calm down. She also knew that Jimmy was pretending not to express his real emotions. In the end, the director gave Jimmy a half-body shot, which also shows Jimmy's behavior to cover up his own heart. Jimmy just woke up in the morning to wash up and Kim suggested him to see a psychiatrist. Jimmy was bewildered. Wasn't this suggestion basically declaring him mentally ill? To avoid facing this issue, the cunning Jimmy lied, claiming he had already found a job as a sales manager and was starting work that day. Hearing that Jimmy had found a job so quickly, Kim was happy for him, but she still suggested he make time to see a therapist. Ever since Chuck's death, Jimmy's behavior had seemed very odd to Kim, so her suggestion was quite necessary. Jimmy, however, only pretended to agree. As soon as Kim left for work, he immediately contacted the job opportunities he had previously turned down. Fortunately, the cell phone store owner didn't refuse him, and Jimmy smoothly started his new job. But to Jimmy's surprise, he didn't see a single customer the entire morning. The only call he received was from his boss. The boss, well aware of the store's situation, suggested Jimmy bring a book to read while on the job. This clearly indicated that a mess had been handed to the newbie to manage. It's well known that salespeople earn their pay through performance. Without any sales, Jimmy could only earn a pitiful base salary. Bored, Jimmy had no choice but to pass the time in the store. By the next day at noon, he still hadn't seen a single customer. During his lunch break, he hurried to handle his own business. Jimmy successfully swapped the Hummel figurine from the copy shop owner through Ira. Today was the day for them to split the proceeds. Ira had a legitimate day job. Seeing his partner arrive, He promptly handed over half of the money from auctioning the Hummel figurine to Jimmy. Jimmy counted the money carefully and found it was much more than he had expected. Ira explained that the auction had been highly competitive, driving up the final price. Jimmy was surprised by Ira's honesty. He could have given Jimmy much less, but Ira had his own principles. He didn't want to do a one-off job because opportunities like this were rare. He wanted to form a long-term partnership with Jimmy. Ira said that whenever there was another good deal, Jimmy should call Caldera and get him involved. Jimmy wondered why they had to go through Caldera if they all knew each other. Ira explained it was for safety reasons, to avoid phone calls being monitored. This comment sparked an idea in Jimmy's mind. He realized the enormous potential market for private phones. So, Jimmy grabbed a paintbrush and started advertising for the cell phone store. Jimmy's advertisements were always eye-catching, using just 2 colors to outline striking words. The message was, "Being monitored? We sell privacy." Before long, a car drove past the store, and Jimmy used his usual magic trick. It never failed. The car backed up and returned. Jimmy hurriedly began his sales prep, pretending to make a call with one of the phones and asking the newly arrived customer to wait a moment. After finishing the fake call, he dramatically snapped the phone in half, creating the exact impression he wanted the customer to see. Jimmy pretended to be busy while the client briefly described his needs. Jimmy assured the customer that this phone was tailor-made for him and would perfectly solve his problems. He then took out the phone to demonstrate it to the customer. Jimmy explained that for safety, the phone had to be destroyed after each call. After Jimmy's talk, the customer has a strong desire to buy. However, Jimmy snatched the phone back, saying these phones were already reserved by other clients. Jimmy deliberately created a sense of scarcity.
Thanks again.
Tell your friends.
There's no denying Jimmy was a sales genius. That evening, Jimmy found Kim's favorite movie, but Kim said she had work to do and no time to watch. Seeing workaholic Kim, Jimmy couldn't sit still either, saying he also had unfinished work, but Kim pointed out it was already 9 p.m. Jimmy said he wanted to make a good impression on his new boss. Jimmy always found a good reason for his actions. He went to the cell phone store, used his own money to buy a batch of phones, and then drove off to try to sell them. Jimmy approached some small-time thugs, but his attire made them think he was a cop. But this small hurdle couldn't stop clever Jimmy. He immediately drove to the nail salon where the rent wasn't due, and then he found a decent outfit. Jimmy's streetwise look made him more approachable to his target customers. He went to the hot dog stand where the thugs hung out and started his crazy sales pitch. Jimmy used to be a punk, so he knows what these guys need. Privacy was their pain point, and Jimmy's phone sold like hotcakes because of it. Just as his business was booming, a gang of arrogant bikers roared in, scaring off the other thugs. Instinctively, Jimmy hid in his car, but after a moment's thought, he decided to take the risk and try to sell the remaining phones. To others, this might seem like a fool's errand, but Jimmy had seen it all. He'd even dealt with the terrifying Tuco. These thugs were nothing in comparison. Jimmy started with a simple self-introduction and then analyzed the various benefits his product would bring them. As a result, his efforts paid off, and Jimmy successfully sold all the phones he had brought. However, to Jimmy's surprise, the 3 thugs he encountered earlier were watching him and robbed him of his hard-earned money, beating him up in the process. Kim, awakened by the noise from the bathroom, saw the injured Jimmy and quickly grabbed some ice from the fridge for him. This incident made Jimmy reflect on how he used to be one of those thugs, yet now he couldn't sense the danger approaching him. Jimmy realized it was time to see a therapist. The next day, he wiped off all the ads from the glass, then went to the probation office for his pre-trial diversion check-in. Unfortunately, he ran into Howard in the restroom. Howard looked quite haggard, concerned. Jimmy asked what was wrong. Howard replied that he had already told Jimmy a lot. It was clear that Chuck's death left Howard feeling guilty and remorseful, and he hadn't been able to get past it. Just as Kim had suggested to him, Jimmy suggested Howard see a therapist, but Howard said he was already seeing one, twice a week. It seemed that some issues couldn't be resolved by therapy alone. They required personal effort to overcome. Jimmy tore up the therapist's number and flushed it down the toilet, then headed to the probation officer's office. Jimmy officially answered a series of questions from the probation officer and stated that he would come here regularly over the next few months. He added that once he regained his law license, he planned to start an even bigger law firm with his partner, better than the previous one. This had always been Jimmy's goal.
Lawyer.
Yeah. Lawyer.